beginning.
I just finished Alan Wake 2, and now I'm ready to report my evaluation of the game, just in case you're considering to play it. Before we begin, I would just like to quickly address the graphic situation on PC. It's quite beautiful, but is very demanding, even more so than Cyberpunk. Unfortunately, there's no in-game benchmarking test, so a good early point where we can calibrate our graphical settings would be in Chapter 2, which is at Cauldron Lake during nighttime while it's raining. As of version 1.06, the game seems to be stable, apart from a minor visual bug that only happened around 2 times in my entire run, and a saving issue which I'll talk about later. I experienced the game in normal difficulty and at a standard playthrough, where I tried to collect all available upgrades and solve every puzzle. I also didn't skip on anything, such as dialogues, cutscenes, and any written information found throughout. As a result, I clocked in over 23 hours to finish it. This is because it's a shared adventure between 2 major characters, who we can switch in between at certain save points, and all of the maps are immense, that are designed to be backtracked just in case we forgot to pick up a couple of items, or something could be accessed at a later time. All of the walkable environments are worth exploring, because item boxes and upgrades can be found almost anywhere. Puzzles in particular can range from something quite easy, like a variation of a Simon memory game, to one that would challenge our mental capabilities. The variations keep things fresh and interesting, but solving them can take up a lot of time. This is the first big change from the previous game, where the progression was very linear. The other is in terms of story and combat. In the first game, both elements are delivered in equal measure, but in Alan Wake 2, combat has been reduced and the story is more emphasized. If we use Resident Evil 4 Remake as reference for the ratio of these 2 elements, which is mostly 1-to-1, this game is more like 2-to-1 in favor of story. Using a tree as an analogy, the main trunk of the story is revealed in a gradual stepwise manner as we make progress. However, we are also presented with a lot of information branches that adds to the narrative, but doesn't necessarily make its move forward, and they can vary from a 1-minute character monologue to a couple of articles that we can read in under 2 minutes, and all the way to a 10-minute video. The main storyline itself is interesting and easy to grasp, but I just have to give you a forewarning that the entire presentation is saturated with so much info about its world. Thankfully, the game organizes everything we need to know through the character's menu spaces. This is also the reason why Saga's detective work and case board is simplistic, because it's just a creative way of keeping us informed with what's going on as new details about the story emerge. There's even one line from Saga that alludes to it early on.
Are we characters or the audience? Witnesses to their design? All the above?
It's all about control. Deciding what happens to who. Don't let it drag you in.
Too late. I'm already hooked. I need the next chapter.
There is, however, one outstanding issue that I can't talk about without tripping a spoiler, and it has something to do with her profiling ability. We'll reserve that topic for another time, but for now, let's just say that talent of hers is quite convenient, and is something you'll notice the first time it's demonstrated. As for Alan, his writing ability and how it affects the world is also put on display, but I'd rather not show it here because I think it's a novel idea, or at least one that I haven't seen in any other games I played. You have to see it for yourself, it's very cool. Moving on to enemies, there are usually around 3 of them at a time, and can only spawn in certain areas, unlike in the first game where they're just relentless. But that doesn't mean the combat is any easier. In my experience, normal difficulty was challenging but fair, and having the right weapon combinations and upgrades can go really far to offset this in our favor. The mechanics is very similar to the first game, especially when dealing with shadows. The darkness has to be removed first before we can start blasting. Taken people, on the other hand, don't have their entire body protected by it, so I usually would just use the flashlight boost on them if their head is not exposed. Defense is still primarily done through timed dodges, and this is where the tension of the combat comes from. The amount of ammo in our weapons are usually not enough to eliminate an entire wave of enemies, so we'll have to reload while keeping an eye on them, ready to dodge their attacks when it comes. Evasion maneuvers will cancel the reloading animation, but there's usually an ample amount of delay in between their flurries, and thus gives us a chance to do so. In addition to this, some enemy types like to attack from afar and or out of view, so a good pair of headphones or speakers are highly recommended. It's critical to our character's survival that we know the location of enemies at all times, even those that are not in our line of sight. Thankfully, the game's sound design is fantastic, which makes good use of the stereo soundscape. There were times when the sound of rustling bushes made me look in that direction, thinking there might be enemies lurking nearby. Gun sounds, meanwhile, are punchy and entertaining to hear, which is not surprising because it's one of the features in Remedy's games that has always been consistently great.
Story is a monster.
When it comes to the ambient and combat music, I'm happy to report that it does this very well. The directors Sam Lake and Kyle Rowley made the right choices when the music should be in the background or when a certain scenario calls for something massive. As for the game's soundtracks, this is something that you'll have to hear and see for yourself, but I think you'll like it. I certainly did. Another particular high point for me is the masterful blending of game graphics with real footage. The creative transitions and overlays between them are seamless, which enhances the immersion instead of being a cause for distraction. The only thing that didn't sat well with me was something tied to the overall style of delivery. This game really loves to use jump cuts in combination with loud sounds. I recall one particular portion that leads up to a boss fight, where the flash cuts would trigger every few minutes, and I thought it was so excessive to a point of annoyance. The funny thing is, I know it was a deliberate choice because the protagonists themselves reacted to it. So just like the warning screen every time we open up the game, this word of caution should be heeded. Right alongside an in-game benchmarking tool for the PC version, I would love to see a per-chapter save file, just like in the first game, because as of now, we only get a couple of manual and quick save file slots, which is very restrictive. I also encountered a problem with one of the tutorial pop-ups. At one point in my playthrough, I loaded up an earlier portion to check something, and this guide came up while I was facing a save point. As I pressed the button to close the window, the same input also triggered the quick save, and overwrites about 2 hours worth of progress. If you already got a handle of the mechanics, I recommend turning it off for safety. Other than these issues and reservations, I think the game is great overall, assuming you can synchronize with its pace. If you're going to give it a shot, I highly suggest that you mentally prepare, in the same manner that we condition ourselves before watching a 3.5-hour Martin Scorsese film. Because Alan Wake 2 is an intricate jigsaw puzzle that slowly reveals its terrifyingly beautiful image, one piece at a time. Thank you for watching.